If you'd have asked my two children what was the most important thing in Daddy's life, I think both of them would have said Bink at the time. So it was a good sort of refresh button for myself personally. And also it sort of, made me realise that actually you have to allow businesses to grow and evolve themselves. And the business isn't about you, it's about the business. So it's doing the right thing for the business.
Hey guys, it's Matt Haycox and we're here for another episode of the Matt Haycox Show, and today I've got with me serial entrepreneur Greg Gormley. He's built businesses, he's sold businesses, he's the founder of Bink, the founder of Skoot, and he's also someone who has been thriving in the face of corona adversity. He's hired 10 staff from Zoom that he's never met, and he's been kicking ass at a time where a lot of other people have been suffering and feeling doom and gloom. So looking forward to talking to Greg, I guess, about building and scaling businesses, and also how to make the most of these troubling times. So Greg, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, obviously I've given a very brief introduction to, and I've mentioned a couple of the businesses that you founded, but I guess tell us a bit more, where did it begin?
Sure.
How did your journey start?
Well, for my sins, I'm actually an accountant. So from the age of 10, I very sadly wanted to be an accountant and never deviated. I qualified when I was 25. Qualified with Smith & Williamson, who are quite a large accountancy firm, and decided that once I qualified, I wanted to get out. So after working in practice for an additional year, I ended up joining News Corporation and worked for their technology division, which was really exciting.
As an accountant?
Well, really as a sort of financial controller, but being involved in all sorts of interesting things. So they had a large R&D centre in Israel. So I was sent over to Israel to evaluate projects. And one of those projects was called Extended Television, and that turned out to be Sky Plus. So I was the guy that signed off Sky Plus, if you like. So it's exciting things like that I was involved in initially, and that really got me grounding with sort of the technology side, which I really do love. Whilst I was there for 7 years, I undertook a number of different roles, ending up being finance director of EMEA and then eventually leaving, mainly because I wanted to progress further. I ended up joining another NASDAQ listed business and travelled across Eastern Europe working for a company called Central European Media Enterprises, which was an exciting time. And again, it was a case of flying every week to different TV stations, which was all free-to-air television. And I was the go-between between London and all the sort of general directors who were all localised in those countries. So that was a really interesting time. But I'd had 2 children, and being in a plane every week was glamorous for a few months. But after a couple of years, it sort of took its toll. And I decided to leave and set up my own business. And really what I wanted to do was take the sort of corporate governance of large businesses and install them into small, medium enterprises, help them look at strategy, help them look at growth, help them look at fundraising, and then even potentially exit. So there was a few businesses I helped along the way where we brought in new funding, we streamlined some processes, and then we exited a couple of businesses as well. And that really sort of got my teeth into the sort of entrepreneurial side of growing something from scratch.
And just before we go on to the 2, I guess, big businesses that you've founded, how was that step of kind of coming out of the corporate world? I guess at what were you, mid-40s or something at that point?
Well, no, I was only 33, 34 at that point.
But having had that security,
sure,
and also I guess jokes aside, being an accountant and being risk averse, probably. Yeah. How did you find stepping out into your own as a bit? On your own as an entrepreneur, and I guess what advice would you give to other people struggling to make that step?
Sure, I think naivety is quite a good thing some of the time, because you tend to step out and go and try and make it. The reality behind it is tough, but it's exciting to do. And I think you always have to be true to yourself and follow something that you're passionate about. So don't go and get involved in something because a friend said that'll do and that'll work and that'll make money. You have to be absolutely passionate about it, and you have to be prepared to live and breathe it. And it does become part of your life. So the whole sort of premise of me sort of spending more time with the family didn't actually happen, because all I did was just spend more time working for my own businesses.
I mean, when you set out in life in the beginning, obviously I know you said you'd always wanted to be an accountant, but did you ever have aspirations to own your own business?
Yeah, I think my father's fairly entrepreneurial, and he's always done lots of different businesses. I come from quite a large family, so we've all sort of mucked in together over the years, and it's been a sort of interesting journey. And for me, I really enjoy business. I find it a fascinating thing. I'd rather be involved in business than on the golf course, for example.
So I kind of knocked you off your story, but tell us about the founding of Bink then.
Yeah, so Bink was founded in August 2014, and it was really a simple idea from a friend of mine who was my co-founder, Lee Clark, and it was all about shopping. And he's a big Manchester lad, 6'2", and he hates shopping with a passion. And he was persuaded by his family to go shopping with them to Boots, and they're going on holiday. So he was walking around with 2 baskets, big mistake. The baskets got filled up, about £300 at the till, and the woman at the till goes, "Oh, have you got your Boots Advantage card?" And he's there going, "No." But his wife was with him, so he turns to his wife, "Have you got your Boots Advantage card?" She looks in her handbag, and it's like, "Oh no, it's in the other handbag." And he's like, "Why is it so difficult to get a simple thank you from a retailer when you spent all this money with them, and you know they expect you to carry around a piece of plastic that says their name on it, and you have to swipe that piece of plastic, which is crazy in this day and age." I mean, just as an example, there's 2 billion plastic loyalty cards in the US alone. Right. That's the height of 27 Mount Everest. Those plastic that's used takes 500 years to biodegrade, so that's 17 generations. A classic example recently was Tesco sending out 19 million plastic loyalty cards to get re-engagement with their customers. Now, the reality is all those customers that got their new card would have taken the old card and probably chucked it in the bin. So if that ends up in landfill, that's going to be there for another 500 years. So we wanted to eliminate the plastic card and basically link your transaction to your payment card. So whether you pay chip or PIN or through mobile phone, it didn't matter. We can add the loyalty ID, pass that back to the retailer, and we just do instant data collection automatically.
And so you've identified two problems. We'll put it at least 2 problems. I mean, what was your primary focus, or was one the byproduct of the other? In terms of, were you trying to solve the problem that that Lee had forgotten his card and therefore wasn't going to get his points, or was this more of a social play, or was one a byproduct of the other?
I mean, very much we wanted to be the consumer champion. So every time you shopped, you got your loyalty points, rewards and offers every single time. And in fact, we even had within our app identification of loyalty programs that you weren't a member of. So it could highlight your last transaction. You could join the loyalty scheme with a touch of a button because we had all your information, and then it'd give you points for that last transaction. So that was the sort of ultimate dream.
Okay. So, and what it was an app then that the retailers, all the retailers could sign up to.
Exactly that. Okay. So Bink is very much a native app that's in its own right. And what we looked at was how we can actually scale, because scaling for Bink was the most important thing, and we wanted to get to tens of millions of users. Basically, we quickly identified that actually working with banks, it would be a really good thing. So what we do for banks is basically we're a conversion tool to help more people go into mobile banking. So our first investor and sort of customer is Barclays. They'll be going live pretty soon, and they're working really closely with us to be live in their mobile banking app. We have 10 million users. And straight away, within your banking app, you'll be able to see your purchases, and you can be able to link into loyalty as well. And it'll all be through Bink.
And do you try and leverage Bink off the back of the retailers that you bring on as well? So you mentioned Boots. So if Boots becomes a partner of yours, do you use them to recommend Bink to their customer
Exactly
base?
that. I mean, when we signed up Iceland, for example, it brought us 100,000 users in a period of about 4 weeks. So suddenly it's this accelerator that they do. And the more people that use it, the more that get used to it. And actually you start realizing that actually you can collect a lot of information from the data, but also you can give a lot back to your customer because you can serve them a lot better because you understand 100% of their purchases.
And how do you monetize?
So we monetize from the retailer. So we charge them a small sum to run their loyalty programs. For example, if someone rings up and says, "I've lost my loyalty card," to send them out a brand new loyalty card that has to be printed, bespoked and sent costs about £1.50. So if you've got 19 million members, you're going to have a certain number that's going to lose their card every year. Yeah. And suddenly the costs of running that whole platform, you can just automate with Bink.
So you actually completely take over the loyalty program. You're not an addition to their existing loyalty program. You actually replace.
No, we don't replace their program. We're very much about data collection. Okay. So suddenly it means that if you're at the till, classic case in point, the stores of growth tend to be the express stores, and you can be in the queue with chip and PIN or contactless. Your payment is probably going to be less than £30, and you may have a loyalty card in your pocket, but you look at the queue behind you and you just want to pay and go. So you can't even be bothered to get the card out. And they found that data collection in those stores was around 15%. So they used to, in the olden days of shopping where you used to go once every 2 weeks, the big out of town stores, data collection there was about 87%. So suddenly they don't know what their customers are actually buying, which is a real problem for a lot of retailers.
Cool. So carry on with the Bink journey anyway.
So Bink, the way we did Bink was basically we got agreements with Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. And again, classic case in point of naivety, we went knocking on the doors of these big Goliaths. It took us probably about 18 months and flying around the world, spending a lot of time with data privacy, lawyers, etc. But we eventually got agreements from those three big schemes, and what it meant was that any card registered with any of those platforms, we could get an authorized data feed from them, which enabled us to then add the loyalty ID and pass it back to the retailer, which was a huge achievement. So that really was then about growing the business, getting the infrastructure right and being able to scale the whole platform, because obviously at the end of the day what we want is tens of millions of users, certainly in the UK and also when we go over to the States. So that really took us a period of about 3.5 years. In the final sort of year that I stayed at Bink, which was during 2018, it was a case of looking at the whole team, looking at who could take it to the next phase, because there was different skills needed. We were starting to work with a lot more banks and payment platforms. So really, both Lee's background and my own background was more on sort of SMEs, not in the payment space. So we brought in some really smart people that was in their payment world, and they're running it today and taking it to the next level.
Well, I know we were talking just off camera before we started about your kind of reason for for winding down or departing from Bink. Without getting into all the history, you'd had a health accident, and that stopped you being able to operate in the business. I mean, just taking some specific takeaways from that. I mean, how equipped were you as a business to cope with your unexpected departure at that time? I'm just I'm trying to think of takeaways for our audience here who probably like most businesses, everyone thinks we're invincible. No one thinks anything's ever going to disrupt the flow. And the reality is that I guess most small businesses are one-man bands. Even the bigger businesses are reliant on one or two key members of staff, and should those people disappear, there are substantial problems. How much were you affected? Not you, but as in how much was Bink affected when that happened?
I mean, luckily, when it happened, we had a total team count of about 50. So suddenly you're automatically diluted just by having that number. If it had happened sort of 2 years prior, it would have been a big issue because both Lee and I were driving the company forward. So it is really hard to make sure that you've got coverage, but it's something that you always should have in the back of the mind. Firstly, no one should be indispensable. Anyone should be able to leave at any point. And that's something that you must always look to try and cover. And always have a contingency plan, because you never know what will happen next. I mean, 22nd of June 2018 is etched on my brain, and having a motorbike accident that severe, there was no question whether I could try and continue.
And when you recovered, why did you not go back?
Sure, I did go back for a short period of time, and really the going back was just to finalise on some of the investment round that we were completing with the investors that I had sort of contacted and brought in on the original agreements, and then really finalising the Barclays deal. And once the Barclays deal had been signed off, there was a new CEO announced and a new team that had this payments background that could take it to the next level. So it seemed the right sort of time for me to sort of turn around and go, right, done my stint, you guys carry it on.
Do you miss it? I mean, if the accident hadn't have happened, do you think you'd have still been in place? In your role? Very much so. I mean, Bink, if you'd have asked my two children what was the most important thing in Daddy's life, I think both of them would have said Bink at the time. So it was a good sort of refresh button for myself personally, and also it sort of made me realise that actually you have to allow businesses to grow and evolve themselves. And the business isn't about you, it's about the business. So it's doing the right thing for the business. And from there, really, I had some downtime to start with for a month in sort of February, March 19. And the first sort of couple of months was great, but suddenly it's like, oh my God, I need to do something. And that's something, I guess, that segues us into Skoot.
Yes.
Excuse the pun.
Yeah, very much so.
So what, tell us about Skoot. Where did the idea come from?
Sure. So Skoot was very much an idea founded from my daughter, and she had passed her driving test. She was only 17 and 3 months, so she's just was so keen to drive. And as soon as they drive, they go out and about and they're away. They're absolutely away. And your driving test is one thing that even I can remember passing, and it is this sense of pure freedom. So she was out driving, literally, she'd probably passed a test within 2 weeks. It was a Friday night and she was out driving her friends, going to the cinema, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and I texted her saying, "Oh, are you going to be home soon?" Yeah, came back to the text, home in half an hour. So I thought, right, I'll go to bed and just check out when, she's back home. So I woke up at 1 a.m, she's not home. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I text her again saying, "Are you okay?" "Yep, fine, just giving someone a lift." I was like, okay, fine. "When are you back?" 20 minutes. So I said, great. So I went back to sleep, woke up at 3:30, she's still not home. And literally it was like, oh my God, where are you? What's going on? So I'm ringing her and she goes, "Oh, it's fine. I'm now giving my cousins a lift. Just been over to Guildford, picked them up and I'll be back." Anyway, she got back in at 5 a.m. Obviously I wasn't very happy. I didn't do anything about it that night, but the next day we had a bit of a post-mortem. And I said, "Look, what happened?" And she goes, "Well, what we do is we all just send each other Snapchats and just ask for lifts." And she said, "Anyway, I earned 65 quid. I was like, okay, that sounds good, but is it legal? She's like, "I don't know." So I started doing a whole load of research about it and came across a Facebook group called Cash for Lifts in Bournemouth, which is from my hometown. There's about an audience of 5,000 people. And police had ended up stopping about 150 people over a weekend, and they're all being issued with warning letters saying that they can be fined £2,500, they can have 6 penalty points on their licence, and they're also have invalidated their insurance. And it's a criminal
for being
offence.
an illegal taxi service.
Exactly that. They're acting as a PHV, a private hire vehicle. And so I was looking at that thinking, okay, that could be a problem for my daughter. But then I stumbled across a company called BlaBlaCar. BlaBlaCar is the best way to think of BlaBlaCar is digital hitchhiking. It's done through Facebook groups. They also have an app. It's been massively successful, started in 2006. They're now in 20 countries across Europe and Latin America. They're valued at 1.6 billion. They've raised $448 million to date. And I was looking at how come they can run that and you can charge money for those journeys, but you can't on the others. And it comes down to a few simple criteria, and it all links back to the Road Traffic Act of 1988, which is all to do with you must carry less than 8 people. It's not normally a problem. Most people can't carry that many anyway. You can't advertise yourself as a taxi. So obviously those Cash for Lifts Facebook groups were advertising a taxi. And then thirdly, you can't make a profit. And it's this element of can't making a profit, which is really key, what we work to. So within the UK, we pay the drivers 45p a mile, which can be charged to the friend, and then Skoot makes a margin on top of that. And it makes sure they stay legal and compliant.
So the 45p per mile that goes to the driver.
Yeah.
But technically they're not making a profit on that?
Technically they're not, because it's the banding of the HMRC rate. So whenever you're doing any mileage up to 10,000 miles in a year, you can claim 45p a mile. So you're not deemed to be making a profit.
Okay, so they just need to decide if that's economically viable for them to work,
exactly
to work at 45p. And who is your typical base of drivers? And are they young people? I guess certainly people looking at a top up income or a second income, or is there anyone actually making a full time gig out of this?
So we've only been live just under 2 weeks, so it's early days. But from the beta testers that we've employed and had them sort of on the road testing it and trialing it,
your daughter,
and my daughter as well. The feedback is very much that, look, I'm giving lifts to my mates already. And quite often they'll say, "Oh, I'll buy you a Nando's or get you a beer later on," and it never happens. So it's always one of those promises that never comes about. This is a simple app whereby the passenger can load up the payment card. They then pay through the payment card. The app just tracks how many miles is driven and then charges the appropriate amount. And then we pass on to the driver how much they've earned from it. So from a driver's perspective, it helps them afford their car. So certainly the 17 to 25 age demographic, they'll be driving around their friends. And no one actually drives for Skoot, but you drive for your network of friends. And they can order each other almost like an Uber. So if they're stuck, just left the cinema, it's late at night. In the olden days, I wouldn't have had a mobile phone, but if I had, I'd have ring up first friend, can you give me a lift? No, next friend can give me a lift. And then it'd be about, oh, how much will you give me in cash?
And is that how this is envisaged to work then? That it's more a social app than a particularly commercial endeavour? As in, are you just typically driving for your pool of friends, or would you be taking absolute randomers in the car as well?
No, so very much the way it works is it only connects
like
people.
Snapchat with wheels.
It only connects people who have their mobile number in your handset and you have it in theirs. It will only connect then. So you're going to be at that
But you don't
level.
have to have put your number into the Skoot app. It just APIs into your phone and pulls from your contacts.
Exactly that. And then we just link people together in the back end. So we have their mobile number, but we don't keep the mobile number, we hash it. So basically we just have a whole load of variables that's linking people in the back end, which is quite smart.
Oh, okay.
We've registered a couple of patents in the US with that, which is quite interesting. But Skoot has two key criteria. One is an instant ride, whereby you can be on driving, the app, you tell it you're actually happy to drive tonight, and a friend can be leaving the pub or cinema and say, oh, I need a lift, and take me from A to B, and your friend can come pick you up, drop you off, and then charge the appropriate amount through the app. Or you can be going to a festival together, saying, oh, look, I'm going to Glastonbury when they start up again. Send it out to a whole load of friends, they can accept the lift, it charges them in the app, and then they all go together and share the cost. And so very much we've got this audience about sharing cost is another thing. So we're actually looking at commuting now as well, because the whole demographic of people going to their place of work 5 days a week is probably not going to happen for a while. So if I'm now going to work only 2 days a week, I might want to drive. It might cost me more. So why don't I share the journey with friends and colleagues?
Yeah. And just before we started to record this, we talked about the fact that you've employed 10 staff during lockdown using Zoom that you've not actually met yet. I mean, I guess as someone who's been employing staff face to face in the past, how much of a difference, or how did you find it difficult?
Sure. I mean, we were quite lucky in as much as we'd raised 1.6 million prior to lockdown, which obviously helped. We had created our app from overseas. Bink gave me a lot of experience of companies that I'd used in the past. And in fact, our CTO at Skoot was head of architect at Bink. So I know his pedigree, I know what he's capable of. And he's come along, he's on board, and he's been doing a lot of these code tests for the developers coming on. So they'll go through a whole code test, they'll then walk him through it through Zoom. And all that process takes about a day. So we've got some really good people on board. And as I say, we've employed 10 people during lockdown, which is quite interesting. So.
And I mean, do you think you've done well during lockdown, or would you say that your business model is one that would thrive anyway, or do you think you've been able to take advantage of particular circumstances?
I mean, lockdown definitely affected us, because on the day of lockdown we were literally going live the week after. So obviously what the lockdown hit and we couldn't go live. So that gave us the opportunity to actually revisit our platform and actually look at what we wanted to do. So what we actually did then was sort of pull pieces apart and sort of rebuild it back up with the view to actually launching across Europe. So we've actually now configured the whole system so it can actually launch across 28 European countries. And then that brought in the need to bring some more people on board, which is why the CTO ended up doing all these interviews and bringing them on board. So we took the advantage of being in lockdown to actually consolidate and grow the business quite far, sort of probably 6 to 9 months more so than what we would have done in terms of if we'd been live and up and running. So I think with any scenario whereby you have a sort of black swan thrown at you and it totally changes your working space, you need to look at how you can vary the business, how you can either launch, or if you're deferring launch, how can you launch better when you can. We also applied for an Innovate UK grant, and the title of the grant was how can you help, how can your business pivot during COVID and after. And what we did was we have brought in an errands function. So if you're self-isolating due to COVID,
dropping off a snack or a good
exactly that, you can order a prescription, or you're click and collect shopping and you can get one of your friends to do it. So you can send it out to 10 friends, and the first one to pick it up and say, oh yeah, I can do that. It'll then navigate them to where they need to go, give them a picture of what they need to pick up, and then they deliver it back, and it's all in the app. And we ended up winning 50,000 for that competition.
Do you think if you hadn't raised the money pre-lockdown, you'd have struggled on your 1.6 mil raise?
I think, if I'm totally honest, I think that level, yes. I would have been able to get to a certain amount, but I think it wouldn't have been at that level. So, I think any company that's starting out in lockdown, trying to look at raising money is always going to be hard, and you need to try and streamline your operation and keep it as lean as possible to make sure that you're showing to all your existing shareholders or any shareholders who are thinking coming on board that you can actually manage with different situations in business.
I mean, I know we can talk fundraising, till 3 weeks on Tuesday, but just as someone who's raised money, at least twice now, both Bink and Skoot, what would be your kind of top 3 tips for people watching and listening who want to raise money for well, you've been early stage businesses both times.
Well, I think there's some really set criteria that a lot of people miss. The first one is that when you register your business, make sure you set it up with a proper structure. So don't just do it on the back of someone else's business. Set up your own business, get the structure, work out exactly the shareholding of what you're expecting, work out what money you want to raise at, and make sure it's a realistic figure. Don't put too big a value on it. And then make sure that business is registered for SEIS, so Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, which is really good. And that should be your first 150,000 raise, because the risk profile for an investor under SEIS is very, very low. And it just means that you can get your MVP up to a level where you can then go to the next round. So I'd personally do a 150,000 raise. And then when you get your MVP up and running, you can actually demo your product, and then you can actually start getting investors on board and utilising a lot of these clubs. So, there's the likes of Crowdcube and Seeders. That has a place probably a bit later on, but certainly some of the EIS clubs that are around that you can actually search online. That's where someone can invest money, they get capital free gain, and also they get 30% of their investment back. So, I think it's about doing the proper phasing and staging correctly.
So I just want to dig a bit deeper on pivoting and finding positivity in the face of adversity. And again, to contextualise this conversation for anyone listening or watching after the fact, we're filming and recording this in August 2020. We're 5 or 6 months into Corona. We've come out of lockdown, but businesses are, many businesses are still suffering, and I guess a lot of people's mindset is very much one of depression and failure. And you're someone who's pivoted, who's kind of probably come out better than you went in, and being able to raise money during that period as well. I mean, what other, comments and top tips have you got for our audience?
Well, I think firstly to understand your own existing business model exactly what you're trying to do and deliver, and then look at what's actually happening to your environment. If the environment is really clear that the business model that you've got existing is not going to work, and actually there's no end game in terms of coronavirus, so you can't just assume it's going to be gone in 2 months, then you have to revisit your business model and say, right, what can we do within it? How can we change it? How can we either change the audience, or how can we change the business model? Is it something that's still needed, and how can we get it out and about in the marketplace? Pivots you can often do in a business whereby you don't need to do a massive amount of change. If it's a case of being in something like restaurants or something like that, you are really struggling. But just as an example, a good friend of mine was supplying fish to restaurants, and obviously restaurants shut down, so he started to do a home delivery service through Instagram. So he could actually still buy the fish, and ended up doing that, and that was a whole pivot. And it's just looking about how I can get a brand new audience, how I can change my business model, and how I can still streamline and make money.
And I think, this is something I've spoken about less lately, but, spoke about very much at the beginning of lockdown, is that, a lot of these, let's say, pivots or necessary business models people have implemented, hopefully may end up even becoming, another full income stream and distribution channel further down the line. Your mate is the example. I'm sure once things are back to normal, he'll be back wholesaling fish to restaurants. But if he's grown enough of an audience doing home delivery, and it's an economically viable channel, why give it up? So I guess look at these pivots with as much positivity as possible, and these right now these are just a chance to keep you alive, but if you get them right, it could actually end up being a blessing in disguise. Oh,
very much so. I mean, with our errands piece, we believe that actually we can get a brand new app out of it as well, because we think the gig economy is going to kick off, because more and more people are going to be losing jobs, unfortunately.
Or even if not losing, wanting to not go back to, to it. I guess I said it in a positive sense, not people who just can't be asked coming back on furlough,
sure.
But people who've gotten used to the chance of being at home and being able to earn an income stream at home and spend more time with friends and family.
Very much so. And for us, it's that errands piece can almost become its app its own right, whereby you can actually ask friends to help So it wouldn't only be picking up a prescription or click and collect shopping. It could even be actually getting my shopping for me, or helping around the house, or putting a garden, handyman, or anything like that at all. So effectively, all of a sudden, we can have a brand new sort of product all delivered through this pivot.
Well, I'll be using to get someone to do the school run for me.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's funny you say about school run, because obviously with Skoot as an app, you can actually start taking turns, and actually you could order each other, and then you all get paid. So if one of you is only doing it twice a week and the other one's doing it 3 times a week, then there's no imbalance, because you're actually being paid for those journeys. But you can definitely order Skoot, doing the school run. A classic case in point was my daughter was at a friend's house the other night. My wife had gone to bed. I had no idea where she was. So she ordered me on Skoot. I accepted the ride. It navigated me to where she was. I pressed the button. It told her I was outside. She then walks out of this house that I didn't even know she was in, gets in the car, and then I get navigated home. And it's great. And I got to charge her money as well.
Well, I was going to say, you've got me thinking now, I need to be able to connect my daughter's Go Henry card to the Skoot app, and every time she wants me to take her to the riding stables, I'll be getting paid for it.
Yeah, fantastic. Very much.
Listen, Greg, thanks a lot for being here. I guess before we go, now's your chance to give a little plug out to guys watching and listening. Where can they find you? Where can they download the app? Yeah. Where can they hear more about you? So
Skoot is a carbon negative lift sharing app for friends that can drive, linking to friends that need lifts. And you can download it on the Apple App Store or Google Play Store as well. Please download it and let us know what you think. There's a comment box within it that you can write in, good or bad. It's always nice to have feedback and just know that people are out there using it.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot for being here, Greg. And guys watching and listening, if you've liked this, please press like. And if you don't already subscribe to the channel or subscribe to the podcast, please make sure you do. You'll get to see more great interviews with other inspirational business characters, celebrities, and other business leaders. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you again next time.